Everybody, I'm David with Bolivar Live. Again, we're back with Chandra with Aaron and Franklin, but today we're talking TWIA again. You know, we've gone through the what is TWIA and how it's run, who operates it, the budgets, and all that. But they had a board meeting on the 8th. And Chandra, this was a big one because rate increases or decreases or stay the same had to be filed by the 15th of August. And so let's walk through what happened at the board meeting a little bit so that people understand what happened, why it happened like that, and what y'all had to do to make sure it was filed correctly.
Thanks, David. So one of our obligations as a board is to, take care of all the statutorily required items. And one of those things is that every year by August 15th, we have to file a rate change with the TDI commissioner. And unfortunately, this year we were able to recommend a zero. Even if it's a zero rate increase, we have to file that and put that out.
You still have to file it.
We still have to file it. So on Tuesday, we had a lot of public comment. We had a lot of legislators there that were speaking out against a rate increase. We had a lot of members of the public, a lot of the local cities had come. So we spent about an hour hearing public comment and before we took, a vote. And the Actuarial and Underwriting Committee had met July 11th. And they do all the actuarial analysis and see basically, how solvent is TWIA? Can we pay claims? And of course, that's the responsibility. Like, we're required to have enough money in the bank to be able to pay claims if we were to have a storm. So what feeds into that, though, is, kind of a monster of our own making. We end up setting the P&L, which defines like how much insurance we're going to buy. We can buy more than that for reinsurance. So we set all those things. So we're kind of the ones not only setting where that PML is and how much reinsurance we have to buy. So we're kind of feeding into maybe those numbers. So they had said that we were deficient 20% on residential and 22% on commercial, and they wanted to make a rate recommendation of 5% for residential and 8% for commercial to try to bridge that solvency gap. And fortunately, in 2021, there was a provision that passed the House and Senate of the legislature, and it said that if there's to be a rate increase, you have to have at least a 2/3 approval of the full board. Now, that's whether or not the full board, you have a full board, or but it's basically you have to have 6 votes in order to push a rate increase. And so when they made that change, that was actually introduced by Representative Todd Hunter, who is one of the biggest advocates for wind, keeping rates down along the whole coast. He's a huge, advocate, and he's actually chair of that oversight committee as well. Mm-hmm. So he had gotten that passed in 2021. So when we went to go take our vote was 5-4 and 4 against. And so even though there was 5 votes for the rate increase, it could not pass because it did not meet that 2/3 threshold. So basically the motion failed. So even though there were more votes for, the motion still failed. So that was a win
because it wasn't a 2/3.
It wasn't that 2/3. And so had that provision not been put into statute and Representative Hunter had not fought for that, we would have seen a rate increase this year.
Okay.
And one of the things that I said at the board meeting, they were several of the people that made comments were like, "Oh, it's just 5%, it's just 8%." And one of the comments that I made in our discussion was that, well, if it's only 5% and it's so insignificant, why don't we find it in our budget? Why don't we take it out of our budget? Because if it's that insignificant that we're going to ask every single policyholder to pay this 5%, you're telling me we can't find 5% to cut out of our expenses to start bridging that gap. So that was kind of my position, because it's like, if you feel like it's insignificant, then why can't we just handle it ourselves?
Right.
So, but anyway, fortunately, we got through that, and then we broke for a few minutes because it was a pretty tense, with everybody there, with all the legislators, everybody there. They were all, and a lot of members of the public. So after we
And
took
that
that
was
vote,
just one vote you were short.
that was just,
They were
yeah, it was
short.
just one vote. Yeah, we
Okay.
were all three coastal representatives and one of the inland representatives voted um, against the rate increase, and then all of the industry representatives and two of the inland representatives voted for the increase. So yeah, it was really close. So,
Okay.
but fortunately, I'm really glad Representative Hunter had fought for that provision, because it's hard to get stuff changed in the legislature. I mean, they do a lot of stuff every session. They propose a lot of bills, and they propose a lot of bills this session. But
Let's talk about what happened during the break and after the break.
so what happened during the break? So during the break, everybody was, really excited. All the people that had come were really excited about that. But then we were talking to our council, and we realized that we're required to file this rate filing, which I already said. We're required to file this rate filing with the Commissioner of Insurance, and our motion didn't pass, so that really did not give staff any instructions on what to do about filing this rate filing. So it took, we decided we probably needed to file a motion to direct staff to file a zero rate filing. Well, we took a vote when we came back on that, and it was still the 5-4. And they were like, and even though that of zero rate filing, because it's not an increase, would not have required the 2/3, we were still 5 against and 4-4, because 4 people said yes, we're going to file zero, and the other 5 said no, we're not going to file zero. So we were still at an impasse, and we still could not give staff instructions on what to do, and we had to have quite a bit of discussion. To come to a consensus and say, look, somebody's going to have to change their vote, or we're not going to be in compliance with our responsibilities as a board in order to file this rate filing by August 15th. We have to be able to do that. And I said, what are the ramifications of not filing it? I mean, they were like, well, you could be sanctioned by the commissioner. And I'm like, well, what does that look like? So I was like, do we really want to go down that path, or do we want to fulfill our obligation as a board? And so finally, Mike Garrick, who's one of the industry representatives, said, look, and he's been on the board a really long time. He was on the board before it was restructured in 2015. So he's got a long history with TWIA. And he said, look, he says, I'm going to leave my objection out there, but I will recommend the zero rate increase so we can comply with our obligation. But I want it reflected in the record that there was a 5-4 vote, and that we did not meet that burden of 2/3 majority. So we were like, we'll put whatever you want in there. That's fine. So we finally came to a consensus that the industry representatives would feel comfortable voting with, the zero rate indication, to direct staff to file that with the commissioner. So we finally came to a consensus, but it took a minute, because everybody kind of had their side. I mean, the industry people really do not want to, you really wanted a rate increase. And the reason that they tend to fall on that side of things is because of the assessments. So if TWIA raises their rates, then we have more money in our coffers to pay claims, and then we don't get farther down that funding schedule, which means we don't assess the member companies. So because they pay part of it, that's the second layer of funding, is there's some public bonds and stuff, and then there's member assessment. So basically, after we go through that first 500 million, the next layer is assessing companies, and they don't want that. So they want our rates to go up so that they don't have to pay as much. And that's just the nature of that relationship, and that's why we have a balance on the board. That's why we have 3 people representing the coastal interest. We have 3 people representing the industry interest, and then we have those 3 kind of swing votes that are representing inland. And we have a pretty good balance of the people that are doing that part right now. But it's a tough decision. I mean, you have an obligation to make sure that the organization is solvent and that we're doing our due diligence and making sure that they can pay their bills and that they're being good stewards of the money and the premiums that they're given. But on the flip side, it's like, we don't want to unnecessarily burden the
Right.
policyholders, with these rate increases. So, and the member assessments, they're the same thing though. I mean, that if you have a state farm policy on your homeowners and they get assessed by TWIA, they're going to pass that along to somebody.
Right.
It's going to get passed along. So we're going to end up paying for it anyway. It's just that we may not actually end up paying for it unless we actually need it. So
Right.
versus doing it up front in anticipation of maybe needing it. So
Great. So when's the next board meeting now?
it's December.
It's in
Uh,
December?
yes, it's in
Okay.
December in Corpus Christi. It's at the Omni Hotel, and I would really encourage anybody to come. I mean, the board meetings. December is not. I would say August is the most volatile meeting because it's December 12th. I'm sorry, December 12th at the Omni Hotel in Corpus Christi, and the August board meeting is the most volatile meeting because it's the one on rates. It's always the one on
Right.
rates because we have to make that decision before that August 15th deadline. Um, and December's usually pretty moderate. The February meeting, we start putting in place the committees to start looking at reinsurance. We start looking at what that PML is going to be for the storm season because we have to have funding in place by June 1. So
Right.
we have to start looking back. Okay, how long is it going to take to place reinsurance? When do we have to make a decision? So we have to start working back. So usually by about February, we're already having to make a decision about what the next storm season looks like. And
Right.
we're so it's there's a cycle that TWIA goes through with the meetings. But I would encourage anybody. I always give the legislators, of course, they get as much time as they want to speak their piece, but the public, we always give them at least 3 minutes. Usually, if they don't go on too long, I'll give them
Okay.
some more time too to speak. But we had several people that spoke definitely over 3 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, but it was compelling, and it's like if it's something that the board needs to hear, I don't usually cut them off. Um, and I think maybe some of those comments made a difference because
Okay.
it's definitely influenced the inland voters.
Yeah.
So
And it's, like Dallas and Austin, there's been some hail damage up there and stuff. And so, they may not have this down here, but they have the tornadoes and the hail up there. And so, when depending on, like my mom, she just had to get a new roof
hmm
and she's up by Lake Travis. And so, it's something that everyone really, it's not just it's everyone really needs to pay attention, uh, on what's going on because it always, if it goes up here, it's going to go up there too.
there's hazards everywhere. There's hazards here. We just have hurricanes, and
Hmm.
if you move farther inland, you've got hail, you've got wildfire, you've got
Tornadoes.
tornadoes. So you've got other hazards. It's just that they're kind of picking on us.
Yeah.
They're penalizing us for living on the coast, and I mean, granted, it's beautiful. I mean, we get that beautiful view every day, but there's also a lot of hard work that happens. I mean, we have ports, we have fishing, shrimping. I mean, we have all these industries that other parts of the state depend on to
Right.
shipping. I mean, we have to have access to these waterways and railways in order to be able to ship things and get it farther inland. So if we couldn't do those things, if we can't afford to have the middle class or the working class
Right.
living
Down here.
in the coast, then we're not going to have anybody that can work in these industries and support the local economy or the greater state economy or
Right.
even the world economy.
Yeah.
So it's got a big impact, and people really need to think about all these things that feed into this. I mean, housing is a huge expense. It's probably the biggest expense people have in their
Right.
monthly bills. And, when you start tacking on, okay, I'm going to add another 5%, 10%, it's like,
Yeah.
that's a
It doesn't
lot. And
sound like much, but it adds up.
it does, especially when that's your largest bill.
Mhm.
So.
If people want to read more about TWIA and get information, is there a website they can go to?
Yes, it's really simple. It's TWIA.org, TWIA.org, and they
Okay.
have a lot of good information on their website. And anything that's not there, they're usually pretty responsive. And of course, y'all can always reach out to me directly because if there's any problems with anything, I mean that's my job. Like I'm a
Okay.
coastal representative. I'm here to represent the coast, the coastal interests, and to make sure that y'all's voices are heard. And so while I'd love to you to come to a meeting and actually say something in the meeting and speak your mind or say
Mhm.
what issues you're experiencing or you've had with TWIA, because that's the only way the board's going to hear that is if
Right.
somebody says that. I mean, we're never going to see a letter that comes in. I mean, occasionally, if there's a letter that comes in addressed to me, I get it. So they scan it and send it to me. But if there's just some general letter sent in, I don't normally see that unless it's
Right.
got my name on it. So you can email me directly, you can call me. But yeah, the best way is probably email because I'm hard to get on the phone. I'm hard to get on the
Right.
phone.
Well, we're going to try and do another show diving into TWIA a little bit more, and I haven't figured out how we're going to do it or get the questions, but we'll talk about it and see if
Yeah,
we can
maybe
get
maybe from these first two shows, people will have questions and we can just
right.
answer
And
what their questions
anyone that's
are.
got questions that maybe wants an answer, you can email me or Chandra. I know my email is david@coastaloutdoorsgroup.com, and I'll make sure I get it. And we'll try and post an email and get some questions in, and you and I can go over them beforehand and talk about them a little bit, and then maybe do a show on that here in the next week or two. So,
That sounds great. Yeah, TWIA is kind of a mystery, and nobody really knows how it works. And I don't claim to know everything. I do know a lot more than probably most people, but there's
right,
still some things that because I'm kind of at a board level, like I don't get down in the weeds in a lot of things, so I may not know the exact answer, but I know who to ask, so we can
right.
find out together.
Right. Well, thanks for joining us today. And remember, you can always see Aaron and Franklin shows here on Bolivar Live every Friday at 10:30. We look forward to doing the next show with you.
All right, you too. I'll see you soon, David. Thank
Uh-huh.
you.
God bless and bye-bye.